Welcome to part 2 of how to crush your JET online interview. Before we continue, did you do the assignment that I left for you in the last video? Did you go back and review and memorize everything you wrote on your application, especially on your statement of purpose? If you haven't, don't watch anymore, pause, and go review all that now. Okay, did you do it? Great. So a lot of questions they asked me was specifically related to my situation. You know, a lot of it was about my teaching experience that I already have. But you should watch this anyway, because some of the questions they asked me, they will ask you too. And what's more important is understanding why I answered the way I did, what the JET program is looking for, the kind of people they're looking for, and how that affected the way I answered, and how that should affect the way that you answer as well. Let me tell you the layout. There were 5 panelists. One of them is the JET coordinator, so that's the person that you've been in touch with via email. Another was a Japanese person who worked at the consulate, who does the Japanese part of the interview. Another was actually a Japanese literature professor. The last 2 were JET alumni. One of them was just a, JET alumni who is kind enough to volunteer his time for these interviews. The other one was pretty much the guy who was running the interview, who was also a JET alumni. The interview lasted about 25 minutes. It was very fast paced, so make sure you have everything prepared beforehand. Make sure you don't do anything that could cause any delay in this interview because they are very busy. Make sure you have your identification ready because they will ask for this as soon as the interview begins. So after you show your identification, they all went around and introduced themselves very, very quickly. And then it's your turn to introduce yourself. So the first question you could say was a very short self-intro, why Japan, and why the JET program. So I gave a very short self-introduction. I said this all with a nice smile and with nice confidence. I said, my name is Dennis Sullivan. I'm 27 years old, or was 27 years old. My hobbies are playing the drums, studying Japanese, going on road trips. Though it's not my hobby really now, but I threw in an obscure Japanese hobby as well that I have done, and that is Kamishibai. When you do talk about your hobbies, make sure you bring up some Japan-related hobbies because that will make you look much more interested in the culture, and they will be much more open to you afterwards, and they may ask you about it later, like how they did with me with Kamishibai. The next part, why Japan? So this is why I say read over your statement of purpose, because that's going to be very relatable to answering this question. Pretty much I recited my statement of purpose and said that I've always liked Japanese culture. In college, I had an opportunity to study Japanese, and there were Japanese students who were studying abroad at my university. I practiced my Japanese with them. My Japanese was horrendous, but I really enjoyed bonding with those Japanese students through sharing a language or trying to share a language despite there being a language and cultural barrier there. I enjoyed it so much that I studied abroad in Japan, and I enjoyed the culture exchange so much that I wanted to do it as a job in Japan, and that is what brought me to Japan. You need to remember what the mission is of JET and make sure your answers relate to that mission. The mission of JET is to create internationalization at a grassroots level. That means is pretty much bringing people from other cultures to Japan so that Japanese people can experience in their local towns people from a different way of life and learn about different cultures, obviously English and possibly other languages as well, and connect on a very local level. So that's why I answer the way I did, saying that I wanted to come to Japan to continue to experience and enjoy international exchange on the local level, which is a perfect answer for JET. With the last part of that question, why the JET program specifically? I told them because other English teaching companies, other ALT companies, especially non-ALT companies like Eikaiwas, they put much more of an emphasis on the English teaching part rather than the cultural ambassador part. The JET program, from what I've seen, puts an emphasis more on cultural exchange rather than teaching English. And I've always found the cultural exchange part to be much more meaningful. I said I wanted to join a company that emphasizes that, like how I do. I said because of that, I thought that the JET program is a very good match for me. So boom. That already right there shows how passionate, how much I understand about the JET program, and how much of a match I would be for the JET program. You need to make sure you have a clear reason as to why you want to go to Japan and why specifically for the JET program. They have a lot of applicants. If you don't give them a real answer, then they don't have to give you a chance. They will throw curveball questions at you. The main reason behind this is just to see how you react under pressure on the spot. Nothing more. There will be times when you're going to be put on the spot as an ALT. So this is just to prepare you for that. This one was specific to me. She asked me, what's the biggest difference between Japan's education system and the United States education system? I was not prepared for that whatsoever. I've never taught in the United States, so I don't know, and I didn't know beforehand that this was a possible question. I could only think of the most basic answer that I could think of, which was, in Japan, because they learn kanji, they write everything in a very specific stroke order, and it's the same with writing the alphabet. They have a very specific stroke order that they're very strict about. And from what I remember, when I was growing up in the US, we weren't as rigid about it. I straight up said, I never taught in the US. It's been a long time since I was a kid, since I was in the education system as a student. But from what I remember, I'd say this was the big difference. Looking back now, there's a lot of things I could have said, such as how the homeroom teacher is kind of like the third parent in Japan. The students eat in the classroom, there's no cafeteria, people change their shoes when they're entering the school. Now here was another curveball question I got asked, that this one they do ask a lot of people, which was, can you talk about a political event between Japan and the US and how you feel about this situation or how you felt about this event? I don't know anything about Japanese politics. I don't really watch the news or anything. So I didn't really have a great deep answer for this, but this was during the pandemic and the vaccinations hadn't arrived yet in Japan, but in the US people were already being vaccinated. So I said a big thing going on right now is how the vaccinations haven't reached to the general public in Japan yet. When in the US people are already being vaccinated. I guess a bit disappointing for me living in Japan, not being able to get vaccinated yet. And the guy wanted to put some pressure on me and said, okay, I'm going to ask you again. How do you think this is affecting relations between Japan and the US? He wanted to put some pressure on me. I said something very basic like, as an American in Japan, it's frustrating for me, and it's probably frustrating for other expatriates to see that there's this major lag when it comes to Japan's vaccination rate and everything. Very basic. I stay calm, cool, and collected. That's the main thing they want. It's just to see how calm, cool, and collected you'll be under pressure. Then they asked me some questions that were specifically about my situation, about me having already taught English in Japan. The main guy asked, I see on your application that you've mostly taught elementary school and a little bit of junior high school. How do you feel about teaching high school? I said, totally open to it. Actually, I would love to teach high school. The other JET alumni asked me if I did any kind of clubs, any kind of bukatsu, while teaching in Hokkaido. The JET program is looking for proactive, positive people. So, saying first, I was mostly an elementary school ALT, and bukatsu, school clubs, is more of a junior high school thing, which is very true. I taught in elementary schools about 90% of my time in Hokkaido. And then also I said because of Corona, I didn't really get many opportunities to, which they understood. And I told them of a couple of chances where I tried to. I originally was gonna play in an elementary school's band, and that was actually gonna be a thing. Then Corona canceled that. So in the end, I still looked like a proactive person who was trying to get involved locally and promote internationalization. If you get asked any kind of question try to relate it somehow to being proactive at a local level. You need to show that you are the one that will take the initiative. On to another question. The professor said, so Dennis, you mentioned earlier about doing Kamishibai. Was this for an English class or did you do this in school somehow? So Kamishibai, it was very popular in Japan before TVs were a common thing. Pretty much it was reading a picture book from like a mini stage almost. And so you have like a little mini stage, you know, kids would be gathering around, you're narrating the story, animating it with a picture, and then you take the picture off and this the next picture, you keep telling the story. They asked me, was this for school? And I was thinking to myself, no, because remember, the JET program loves people who are proactive, take initiative, especially in Japanese activities. I thought to myself, all right, my time to shine. Get on the sunglasses for this. So I told them, no, this was not through school. This was at the local town library. And I initiated this and set all of this up. When I said this, I heard all 5 panelists go, whoa, that's crazy, wow, ooh, ah. They were saying very good things. I was introduced to Kamishibai by my Japanese teacher. I really enjoyed reading just children's stories, you know, narrating them and everything. And so the town had a children's reading like once a month, you know, just reading picture books. So I said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do that. And I'm gonna bring Kamishibai with me. I'm gonna do Kamishibai at this event. So we set it up with the town. I'll put it in like the local letter for like the Japanese school. Put it in like the news a little bit, the local news and everything. A bunch of students came. It was super awesome. And that is what I'm talking about cultural exchange at the most local grassroots level. I, as a foreigner, made the initiative to do this Kamishibai event for the local town, and a lot of students came, and it was just a wonderful event. I then read a picture book in English afterward, so the kids got to have a fun time with English, as well as watch me attempt miserably at doing Kamishibai. Great event overall, and I told them all of this, and I could tell that I sold these panelists afterwards. So that's what I'm talking about. Next question is very generic. They're definitely going to ask you, which is just, is there any kind of medicine that you would need to have brought with you or prescribed for you if you come onto the JET program? Very standard stuff. I already live in Japan, so they just needed to ask that. Then came the Japanese part of the interview. Now, everyone says that this doesn't affect your score exactly. You know, you don't lose any points if you don't speak any Japanese, which is true. There's plenty of people who come on the JET program who don't know any Japanese at all. The questions start, they get progressively harder, and you can feel it too. The level's going up as you go further. So, and I got to the 7th question. By the way, I'm not saying any of this in Japanese to you guys because I don't need the comment section blowing up over how horrible my Japanese sounds. I know I have a very thick American accent after all this time. Question 1, what's your name? So I said my name in Japanese, in Keigo as well, you know, to impress them. Question 2, where do I live? So I said I live in Hokuto in Hokkaido, Japan. Question 3, where do I want to travel to? And I said I want to travel to Fukuoka, which I actually went to a month later. Question 4, why? I said because I like beaches, it's very warm. I kept it simple. I made sure that I answered the question, but as simply as I could, so that there was as few possibilities to make mistakes in Japanese as possible. Question 5, what was my favorite place that I've been to so far in Japan and why? I said Nishiri Island, which is an island off the most northern part of Hokkaido, which is the most northern part of Japan. Part of that question was why. And I said the island was beautiful. It's literally just one giant mountain in the middle, and I hiked it, and it was a 14-hour round-trip hike, and it was a very memorable experience. And you know, it was just a beautiful trip going from the very bottom of Hokkaido to the top, which took about 12 hours of driving because I went along the ocean along the way and everything. It was just very beautiful. So that was my reason that I gave. Question 6 was, talk about your favorite festival that you've experienced in Japan so far. I talked about Hakodate Summer Festival. It was like a 4-day festival, so there was fireworks one night, and another night there was kind of like the parade, and I was dressed up in a yukata or a kimono with my friends, and we did the famous squid dance. That's not based off of the Squid Game. God, I miss pre-corona. Question 7 was a lot harder. The consulate woman went on a little bit of a ramble, I think to see how much I was following, where pretty much the question was, how do you feel about festivals being done online this year instead because of corona? Because she took a long time to get to that question, the actual question, I asked her to repeat it. That might have been why she stopped asking questions afterwards, because I couldn't figure it out on the first try. She asked me again, shortened it a little bit for me, and pretty much my answer was, we shouldn't be doing festivals online because that kind of takes away the atmosphere and the whole excitement behind it. That was my answer. It was in pretty bad Japanese. And that was the end of the Japanese part of the interview. So I got to question 7, which I was pretty proud of. So that was it for their part of the interview. Like I said, interview goes by very fast. You're answering questions, and before you know it, 20-25 minutes have passed. They'll give you a little bit of time at the end to ask a couple questions yourself. First thing, if you have a question about the JET program, research it online first and see if you can get an answer online. They do not want you asking questions that you could find the answer to online. That is a waste of time. My first question was, what are some of the non-English teaching / non-translator jobs that people do after the JET program? One of the panelists, who was a JET alumni, said he worked for an Kaiwa after JET and then just came back home. So that didn't really answer my question. But he said that some of his friends came back and they were working for like Facebook and Google. But he and the other panelists all said, and which is what I'm going to say to you too, have a long-term goal that you could pursue and work on outside of work, or if you can during work. You know, maybe if you want to be a teacher after all, make sure you have a long-term goal that you could pursue, that you can act on in your free time. Because you will have a lot of free time. I definitely have more free time now than I did when I was working 2 jobs in Hokkaido. But eventually, your time in the JET program is going to have to end. Think about what you do want to do long-term after JET. Maybe you don't know yet, but while you're on JET, then actively figure out what it is you want to do long-term and work towards that, so that when your time has come for you to leave the program, you know what you want to go, you know where you want to go next. The second question had to do with me specifically, which was when was the FBI background check due? Because living in Japan, it's pretty hard just to get fingerprints for the heck of it, and it was going to be a lot more complicated for me to send fingerprints, get the FBI background check sent back to me in Japan, just to then have it be sent back to America, to the Honolulu consulate. So that was a good question to ask, because there's no answer for that online. This brought me to the end of the interview. Now, here's something I want you guys to do, possibly for brownie points. At the end of the interview, they asked me if there's anything else I'd like to say or any other questions. I said, thank you all so much for letting me have this opportunity to interview for the JET program. And I looked at them in the eyes through the camera. I said, let me tell you, if I am accepted into the JET program, I promise you, I will give this job my all. I know I can. I love the cultural exchange. I know how to do it. I promise if I become a JET ALT, I will do everything I can to be the most involved, passionate, and best ALT you could ever have, even though I sound full of myself. And I promise that I will bring internationalization to the kids, to the people in the town. I promise that I will do everything in my power to satisfy the JET program's mission. This was how I ended the JET interview. I strongly recommend that you do something like this as well at the very end of your interview. Let the interview end with them feeling really positive about you. Let them see the passion in your eyes, how much you really want this position, how much you're willing to work hard. Make this a wonderful relationship between you and the people in your town. and just everyone involved in general. If you're a rambler like how I am, make sure that you record yourself beforehand and practice answering these JET questions, the questions you'll possibly be asked, and make sure you learn how to be as concise as possible. Do not ramble. Do not ramble through these questions. And that's it. That's it for this video. I hope you guys are fired up. With these tips, you are going to be as baller as I was in the JET interview. Get ready to have a killer interview. Get ready to have an amazing adventure in Japan. And most importantly, get ready to be the next participant in the JET program.